Welcome to this painting tutorial. How's it going, everyone? Welcome to this video. In this video I will be painting a Genestealer called Neophyte Hybrid for the Kill Team faction, the Devoted Sons. In this video I tried to use the colors suggested in the instruction manual of the Kill Team set, but I adjusted some of the colors to my liking, but try to stay very close to the images you see in the box. This is a fairly lengthy video with tons of colors and steps, and you don't have to use them all in your miniatures if you don't want to, just the ones you like the most. And hopefully this video will guide you to my process and help you paint yours. With that said, let's begin. I'm going to start by priming the model in gray. For that I'm going to use Vallejo Surface Primer Gray through an airbrush. You can use any other primer you like. I would suggest using Corax White or something very light. Because the armor colors for this miniature are very bright and you need a very light base to start. I would like to start with something that is underneath the rest of the detail. For that I selected the pants or the under uniform. For that I'm going to use Stegaddon Scale Green. If this model was a different kind of neophyte, it might have sleeves or uniform in the upper body. You don't have to start here. This is where I decided to do it, but if you do, just try to pick something that is below other things so it's not harder later to paint. Once that's done, I'm going to paint the skirt or any other piece of clothing like this with Khorne red. And this is a very simple step, just thin down your paint and paint these areas. And for all of the paints that we're going to use on this tutorial, we're going to try to use thin down paint so it doesn't cover any detail. Next, I'm going to paint the boots, and for that I'm going to use Vallejo model color black. You could go to paint the armor at this point, but because I wanted to paint the boots below the leg armor, I wanted to do the black first and then clean up the armor. But then again, the armor has some black parts on top of the white, so you might want to go back and forth with these two colors and make sure they both are well base coated. And yeah, that's it. Once that's done, I'm going to use Celestra Gray, and with this color I'm going to base coat all of the white armor. Just make sure to thin down this color just a little bit so it flows easily and it doesn't leave any brush marks or paint crumbs. And apply different coats if it doesn't cover very well the first time. In places that are below the gun or places like that, just try to reach as best as you can with the fine detail brush, as I do, and an overall painting, just having the base coat and some shading will make it look good, and you won't be able to look at those areas anyway after they're painted and the gun is placed on top. So for me, I like to paint fully assembled models. I don't paint in sub-assemblies unless it's very difficult to do so, and if you have a very big cape or something like that, I might paint them in separate parts. If you want, you can do that. You can keep some parts unattached, like the arms, so that you can paint the torso easily. But for the most part, for me, it's easy to do it this way. You don't have to do it that way, just to each his own. Next, I'm going to use Rhinox hide, and with this color I'm going to paint all of the leather areas around the model, such as the holster, straps, any kind of leather area. I'm going to paint it with this color. If it has any wood areas or any other brown areas, you can use this color too, but mostly just base coat these areas with this color. Once that's done, I'm going to base coat the skin, and for that I'm going to use Bugman's Glow. With this color I'm going to paint the hands and the face, mainly in this model. If you have any other flesh areas, you can paint them with this color. And this is just a base coat. It needs to go over all of these areas, being very careful not to paint in other stuff. And that's it. Just make sure to thin it down like every other color and paint these areas. Once that's done, I'm going to paint the carapace armor of the Genestealer with Incubi Darkness. This is very similar to the Stegaddon Scale Green, but it's a little bit greener and darker, and it's going to go over the armor pieces of the Genestealer. Just make sure to give it a couple coats, because in my opinion greens don't cover that well. So make sure to thin it down and cover these areas. Once that's done, I'm going to use Leadbelcher, and with this color I'm going to paint all of the silver or iron dark silver parts. This is mainly the gun, but around the model you can find a couple of things here and there that may benefit from some silver, and it's gonna make him pop a little bit more, such as he has a grenade and some vials or containers on the back of his belt, and any sort of buckle and things like that, you might want to paint them with this color or just leave them as they are, but I'm going to try to cover these areas with this color. And the last base coat is going to be Retributor armor, and with this color I'm going to paint all the last details, such as the stock of the gun and any other details such as the respirator and small details here and there that'll make it pop. There's like a symbol on the skirt, and there's some places here and there that you might want to make them decorative, so you might want to paint them in this gold color. And with that, we're done with the base coat. We're going to go into the washes. Once it's done, I'm going to use Seraphim Sepia, and with this color I'm going to shade all of the white armor pieces. I went all over the armor because that is going to make it look worn and a little bit battered and weathered by battle, and that's gonna look good. But if you want, you can just go into the recesses because we're going to later clean them up. And also this shade is going to go into all of the gold areas, and any area like that that you would like to paint with this wash, you can use this wash for that, and that's it. Also, before you use any of these washes, make sure to shake them well, because if they separate, they don't apply as well as if you just let them rest for a while and just start painting with it. The characteristics of the wash may change as it separates, so don't let it do that. Try to shake those washes or shades each time you use them so that they're consistent. Once it's done, I'm going to use Druchii Violet, and with this color I'm going to shade all of the skin. You can also use it on the green of the arms, that'll make it blend with the skin, but I think I used black for that. For this miniature, I only use Druchii Violet and put them all over the skin, and that's it. Just let it sit on the recesses and tint all of the skin area with this color. Once that's done, I'm going to use Nuln oil, and with this color I'm going to shade everything else that I didn't shade, which is mainly just the brown, the Stegaddon scale green, and the Incubi darkness. Also the silver, and any other part that didn't get a wash, you can paint it with this color. Also the red, I was forgetting about the red, and that's about it. Once that's done, you can leave the model like this, or you can continue highlighting to the end if you want, but this is a good tabletop standard. I'm going to start highlighting the armor first, and for that I'm going to use Ulthuan Grey, and with this color I'm going to bring back the white of the armor. On places that are open, such as the shoulder pads, you can just completely paint it, leaving a little bit of the recesses on the previous color. And on places like the shin guard and the chest piece, there are these kind of a grill pattern, like a lot of lines. You have to be very careful to have very little paint on the tip of your brush, and just paint with parallel lines to catch those raised bits. If you don't want to do it, just do it like a dry brush if you want, just a little bit of a dry brush there and an edge highlight around it, and that should be good. And for the rest of the model, just paint most of the open areas, leaving a little bit on the recesses so it leaves that shade. We're going to give an extra highlight to even bring it brighter. I did 2 or 3 coats of the Ulthuan Grey before I moved into using white. This is Vallejo model color white, and with this color I'm just going to paint the sharpest edges on the armor, and leaving the places that are more hidden underneath the armor as they are. You only need to apply this on the very sharpest and pretty much the outer edges of the shin guard, the chest piece, and all of the edges of the shoulder pads and things like that. When you're applying the last Ulthuan Grey, it's going to look patchy. Let it be patchy. Apply one coat. It's not gonna cover that well. Just let it be like that and let it dry, and apply a second coat on top of that, and they're going to add up and build opacity that way. So with white, be very patient. If it doesn't cover that well, that's okay. Let it not cover that well and let it dry, and then come back and give it a second coat. If that doesn't work, give it a third coat until you reach the full opacity of the color. Once it's done, I'm done with the armor. I'm going to move on to paint the skin. And for that, I'm going to use Cadian Fleshtone. And with this color, I'm going to paint most of the raised parts of the skin, just leaving the very recesses on the previous color. You can play around with this color and leaving a little bit more purple than usual if you want your skin to be purple. Or after you're done with your highlights, just come back and use a little bit more Druchii Violet and place it on the very deepest shadows and places that you want to really make them purple. In my case, I just brought up the highlights with this color and just leave it like that. And leave some of the deepest shadows on the previous color, and just because I'm going to even use another highlight, I try to cover most of the exposed skin area, just leaving the deepest shadows. Once that's done, I'm going to use Kislev Flesh, and with this color I'm going to pick up the extreme highlights of the skin, just the pointiest parts and the most exposed parts on the sharpest edges. I'm going to pick the ears, the eyebrows, the cheekbones, and anything like that that is very bright. And also on the hands, I'm just going to pick the knuckles and any raised parts like that. I'm just going to pick the sharpest edges, and that's it. I'm going to move on to paint the carapace. For that, I'm going to use Incubi Darkness just to clean up and tone down a little bit of that black from the Nuln oil. I'm just going to paint it on the most exposed parts, on all of the, pretty much all of the area, just leaving the recesses on the previous washed Incubi Darkness. Just leaving them very dark and just bringing back a little bit of the color, because the wash turns these areas very matte and kind of dull. Once it's done, I'm going to use Kabalite Green, and with this color I'm going to pick all of the edges on the carapace of the Genestealer. For that, I'm going to use the fine detail brush. I've been using a fine detail brush for mostly all of these areas because they're all very small, and all of the areas on this model are very scattered. So it might feel like a mess at the beginning, but once you get all of those colors in and base coat it starts taking shape and it starts looking pretty good. So just make sure to use small detail brushes to paint most of these areas. You'll be fine. You don't really need a very big brush to paint these models. Once it's done, I'm going to use Straken Green, and with this color I'm going to highlight the previous green with this color, just picking the sharpest edges and the very brightest parts that you can see under the light. Just make sure to stay inside the Kabalite Green, so it so that it looks like a transition of color instead of just paint on top of it, and you'll be fine. Next, I'm going to give the same treatment to the blue of the uniform. For that, I'm going to use Thunderhawk Blue, and this color is just going to go over the raised fold and sharpest edges of this blue. We're gonna keep these colors very dark, and that's fine. We only need to pick the highest areas and the raised folds as an edge highlight, and this is going to be quicker and it's going to make it look pretty good and very dark. Once it's done, I'm going to give it a second highlight with Dawnstone, and with this color I'm going to just color over the same areas that we painted the last step, just painting on the sharpest edges where it catches more light, and in a smaller area so you show the previous colors behind, and it behaves like a transition of color, and that's it. Once that's done, we're gonna move on to the blacks, and for that I'm going to use Eshin Gray, and this is going to go all over the sharpest edges. Again, this is just an edge highlight. Because these areas are very dark, they don't need a lot of highlighting, they just need a small highlight on the very edges, and this is gonna catch all of the black details or all of the tubes or hoses around the armor and any detail that you want to be black. Just paint the sharpest edges. And where I live, it's very hot right now, and it's kind of hard to make these fine edge highlights. If you want, you can use a little bit of drying retarder that's going to help you keep the paint wet for longer. Also, using a wet palette helps, and I'm going to tell you that some people also lick their brushes before loading them with paint, and that helps a little. I've done this before, and I'm not going to advise you to do it because you don't want to be eating paint, but at the same time it works because saliva acts as a natural drying retarder. It feels that way, but if you can use the actual thing, that'll be better. Next, I'm going to use Dawnstone, and with this color I'm going to give an extreme highlight to these areas just on the very tips of the places that are sharpest and that have the catch more light, so that they look a little bit more bright and catch the eye on those very sharp edges. And that's it. Next, for the brown, I'm going to start with Scrag brown, and with this color I'm going to just catch the edges of this very dark leather. And this is a very simple step, as all of the other steps that we've been doing in this tutorial. Just paint it on those edges and leave the recesses and everything else in the previous color. As an extreme highlight for this leather, I'm going to use Deathclaw brown, and this is just going to go on the sharpest details on the corners and places that catch the most light, just as like the other steps. Next, I'm going to edge highlight the skirt with some Evil Sunz Scarlet. I'm going to keep the very dark red. It looks very good, the Khorne red with Nuln oil. It looks very dark and looks pretty cool. I'm just going to pick the edges with Evil Sunz Scarlet. You're not able to see a lot of skirt in this model. Other models have a lot more red. Just make sure to paint only the sharpest edges, and that's it. Once it's done, I'm going to give it a second highlight, this time with Fire Dragon Bright, and this is just going to go on the sharpest corners and the most sharpest edges. I'm just going to paint a little bit of this underneath the other Evil Sunz Scarlet, just leaving a little bit of that color behind, and that's going to give the skirt a very fiery glow. For the silver, I'm going to use Stormhost silver, and with this color I'm going to pick the most prominent parts of the silvers. For most of the small details around the model is just leaving the recesses on the previous color and painting most of the details with this color. For the gun, just try to pick the edges and leave the very dark washed silver behind. That's going to give it a very dark look and a very iron metal kind of feel. Next, I'm going to do the same thing, but this time for the gold. For that, I'm going to use Liberator gold, and this is going to go all over the gold, of course, and it's going to follow the same directions as the silver. Just try to pick those edges on the stock of the gun, and most of the respirator, any other detail that is going to be gold, just pick the edges and the most prominent parts. I've been calling the main body of the gun a stock. It really is not a stock, it's just like a box. It doesn't have a stock, but I don't know if that's correct. I'm not a gun person, but I'm gonna call it that. And finally, I'm going to paint the light that he's carrying on his shoulder. For that, I'm going to paint the bulb with Averland Sunset, just to make sure to paint all that area without painting on the black. If you spill a little bit of the black, it's gonna look natural because the light spills over other things. Just try not to spill that much. Try to keep into just painting the circle. Once it's done, I'm going to use Seraphim Sepia, and with this color I'm going to shade this light. Let it go around the circle of the bulb so that it shades the edges, and it's going to look a little bit better, including me. If you spill a little bit of that Averland Sunset into the black, it's going to blend it to the black and it's going to look better. Once it's dry, I'm going to use model color white again, and with this color I'm just going to paint a dot on the very center of the lens. Or I'm going to paint most of the lens, because the light source needs to be white and the surroundings need to be yellow. That way it's going to look like it's glowing. So I'm just going to touch the center and do a little dot, mostly on all of the center area of this light bulb. This is the finished model. I have to say it was very fun to paint this model. The only thing is that it uses a lot of colors and a lot of repetition. And if you don't want to go through the whole process, just pick the most important colors to you, which could be the armor, the skin, and maybe the leather or the gold, and just go through the process with those colors. And the other ones you can just leave them be with just a base coat and a wash, or just pick the skin and the armor, or just the skin, or none of them, just base coat and wash, and that'll be totally fine. You will have a pretty good looking tabletop standard model. So that's it. Thank you very much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it and found it entertaining and helpful, and that it helps you paint your own kill team set, or any Neophyte Genestealer cult models. I hope this video is helpful to you. If you like it, please leave a comment, like and subscribe to the channel to see more videos later. You can become a patron, follow me on Facebook and anywhere you can find me. The links are in the description, and thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you on the next one. You stayed. Great. Thank you very much for supporting my channel, and if you would like to become a patron, there is a link to my Patreon page in the description below. Your contributions help pay for my work and keeps the channel going. A single $1 a month is more than enough, and you can cancel at any time. If you can't, don't worry, you can support my channel by simply watching my videos and sharing them with your friends. Thank you for watching, have a great day, and I'll see you on the next one.